India basically is situated in a place which is one of the most strategically important parts of the world. We've got the Persian Gulf, we've got the Malacca Strait, all the trade lanes of communication, energy routes, all pass through India's oceanic domain. So this domain is very much ours to protect, ours to police, ours to make sure that nobody else has their tentacles coming in, and you know who I'm talking about there. So, submarines to me are like snakes a little bit. Whenever someone says they either don't like snakes or they fear snakes or they don't understand the hype about snakes, I'm like, how can you not be fascinated by snakes? I say exactly the same thing about submarines, and in defense of submarines, you rarely find anyone who isn't fascinated by submarines. Virtually everything about them is mysterious. It's amazing. They're built to be invisible, inaudible, out of line of sight, barely detectable by most technologies, lurking in the depths of the ocean in the most isolated parts of the world. You're basically signaling to the adversary, in this case China or whoever, don't enter these waters, because then there's no guarantee that things can't escalate from there.
If a nuclear submarine is not in its harbor, that should ring alarm bells for the enemy, because that means it's maybe right next to you. You never know.
The SSNs, or nuclear-powered attack submarines, are the fighter aircraft. They're the ones used in daily, military duties. Unlike your ballistic missile submarines, which are your apocalyptic last resort submarines in the event of the outbreak of nuclear war. Now, people may be tempted to think that, okay, so you've done the difficult job of building nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. Ab to SSN to दाएं हाथ का खेल hai. It's like, chill, you've already done the maths exam khatam ho gaya, now you've got your geography test. But it's not really like that, because a nuclear-powered submarine of any kind is a complicated exercise. With your current submarine fleet, there is no prospect of sending submarines into the South China Sea. Theoretically, a nuclear-powered attack submarine from India could dive somewhere off the coast of Visakhapatnam and theoretically remain submerged for the entire duration of its journey till the South China Sea, and nobody would be any the wiser about it. Apart from the submarine wars and the ship versus submarine wars in World War II, I don't think that kind of thing has ever really happened, where you've seen genuine kind of underwater dogfights between submarines. That's the nature of war. That's the nature of the arms bazaar. It's good to be cynical about these things, but it's a brutal, bloodless business. We are a world that is at war, and that's the way things are. But, for example, there are drones and there's anti-drone technology. There are ships and there are anti-ship missiles.
Hello and welcome. This is the 44th episode of In Our Defense. Shiv, man, what a week it has been in a world closely associated with the world of defense, the world of geopolitics. I came across this meme on social media yesterday that you had this bunch of Indian foreign affairs journalists going to Islamabad, where S. Jaishankar is attending the SCO summit, and they were going there. कि 8 साल बाद the first foreign affairs minister visit, not as a bilateral visit, but for a summit to Pakistan, and there'll be some tamasha. But the tamasha was happening back home in Delhi, with India and Canada facing off over another series of absurd, claims and accusations and allegations by Canada and its various, this time, wings. You had the Canadian Royal Police coming in, holding a very rare press conference. You had Justin Trudeau also hosting a press conference.
Even Lawrence Bishnoi starred in this press conference.
Yes.
Sitting in Sabarmati jail, he must be really happy.
Yeah. A few days after his name, he was accused of, his gang took ownership of the murder of former Maharashtra MLA Baba Siddiqui. We've been down this road before. I don't think we'll be devoting this episode much airtime on this episode to that. We've had a couple of episodes on this whole drama, and honestly, because there's nothing new to discuss. Commentary has been pretty clear. It's the same old set of allegations, cropped up once again. That's just, but fun entertainment, I think, for a few people, I think, sitting on the sidelines. But it's also been a very good week for the Navy, actually. The Indian government has finally gone ahead and signed the deal for 31 MQ-9B Reaper drones, something we discussed just a couple of episodes ago, actually, in detail. 15 of which will be for the Indian Navy, which is why I said Indian Navy has had a good week. There's also been the launch of, if I'm not launch of the first multi-purpose vehicle, is what the Navy chief said in an interview given to one of our correspondents, India Group's correspondents. And very crucially, the Cabinet Committee on Security has finally cleared this long sort of pending project for nuclear submarines.
Yeah.
Nuclear attack submarines,
Yes.
actually. I'll correct myself. Which is something we'll focus on this episode. Sharks, as you like to call them. I've always felt that the topic that we're about to discuss, nuclear attack submarines, they've always been sort of overshadowed by what people generally tend to assume what a nuclear submarine means. Is a submarine that's capable of firing nuclear weapons, which is basically your nuclear ballistic missile submarine, the INS Arihant series, essentially, which is what we discussed in the previous episode. And that's actually when you had said that, these are great, these are amazing, these are definitely, high tech. But what you were waiting for, even back then, this was, I think, around 20 odd episodes ago, was the nuclear attack submarines, which is what we'll discuss on this episode. First, I want to understand from you, why are you so excited about this particular line of Navy's piece of technology? And it's not just you, by the way. There's a 2021 piece by one of our former colleagues, Sandeep Unithan, on the topic of this project, in which he quotes a retired Navy officer, Rear Admiral Raja Menon, who calls them the ultimate arbiter of sea power. Then he also quotes another retired Navy officer, Vice Admiral K.N. Sushil, who was the former commanding-in-chief of the Southern Naval Command. These submarines that gave inspiration to a very popular meme that says there are only two types of vessels at sea: submarines and targets.
Yeah.
So reading this, I got the sense that, okay, it's not just Shiv who's fascinated with this class of submarines. It's really people who know this domain. So tell us, why are you such a big what makes you so excited about this?
So, submarines to me are like snakes a little bit. Whenever someone says they either don't like snakes or they fear snakes or they don't understand the hype about snakes, I'm like, how can you not be fascinated by snakes? I say exactly the same thing about submarines. And in defense of submarines, you rarely find anyone who isn't fascinated by submarines. Virtually everything about them is mysterious. It's amazing. They're built to be invisible, inaudible, out of line of sight, barely detectable by most technologies, lurking in the depths of the ocean in the most isolated parts of the world, ready to wage war, and very destructive war at that. We've done more than a few episodes on submarines, which kind of shows our preference for submarines and betrays my love for them. But this is a very serious business, and Sandeep Unithan, and I want to acknowledge it once again, that he's written more about nuclear submarines and nuclear submarine programs in India than all other journalists in the country put together. So in my view, he's in the journalism world, he's the guru of India's submarine programs. And he's broken all of the stories that are worth reading in this domain. So first of all, hats off to him. And of course, all of that work has been in India today. And most Indian audiences also know about these programs thanks to Sandeep's excellent news breaks and writing. So we have to acknowledge his amazing work on that. Having said that, the fact that the Cabinet Committee on Security, which is basically the Indian government's apex body, it's the final approving body for all defense-related or strategic projects of a military nature or a nuclear nature. It's taken a very long time to clear this program, and that hasn't gone down too well with India's military planners, because let me just lay the groundwork a little bit of context, and then I'll tell you why it's so important. Number one, India already has a submarine fleet that is way too small for its requirements. India has an enormous coastline. In case everyone noticed, we've got a coastline that's more than 7,500 kilometers long. which gives us an enormous, maritime domain, which is our immediate area of responsibility, and the larger Indian Ocean. One doesn't need to stress on the importance of this ocean domain, but India basically is situated in a place which is one of the most strategically important parts of the world. We've got the Persian Gulf, we've got the Malacca Strait, all the trade lanes of communication, energy routes, all pass through India's oceanic domain. So this domain is very much ours to protect, ours to police, ours to make sure that nobody else has their tentacles coming in, and you know who I'm talking about there. Now, for a country of India's size and for a country with the kind of oceanic domain responsibility that India has, we have an embarrassingly small submarine fleet. Ships are a separate thing altogether, but I'm saying, let's assume this as a truism that what Rear Admiral Raja Menon said about submarines is true. They're the ultimate arbiter of sea power. He was talking about nuclear-powered attack submarines. We don't even have one. The only nuclear-powered attack submarines we've ever operated have been leased submarines, which have been suboptimal in terms of, we didn't know very much about them. There were Russian crews on board at all times. It was not an easy experience. Those were more kind of training platforms for India to get used to using nuclear powered attack submarines. Now, what are the differences between these submarines? Very, very quickly, since we have gone through these, but we must assume that at least some of our listeners are not aware. The submarines that India has right now are conventional submarines, which means that they're powered by diesel electric propulsion systems, which consist of diesel engines and batteries, which can get recharged when the submarine is surfaced. Now, it doesn't require you to be a scientist or a rocket scientist to know that a submarine is most vulnerable when it is at the surface of the sea, where it's visible. Its greatest strength is when it has dived and is away from line of sight. It is easily detectable once it breaches the surface. Now, the biggest weakness for a conventional submarine of the kind that India operates right now, we've got Kilo class Russian submarines, we've got Type 209 German submarines, and we've got the Scorpion class French submarines, which we've built here in India. These submarines are excellent submarines. They're all very good in different respects. Most of the ones we have are quite old, but their biggest weakness is the fact that they've got to periodically come to the surface and expose themselves in order to be able to suck in oxygen to recharge the batteries for the diesel motors to actually run and propel the submarine, which means that at no point of time do they enjoy the luxury of being completely stealthy. At some point or the other, every few days or every few hours even, they've got to come to the surface to swallow some oxygen, and that is a highly undesirable thing as far as submarines are concerned. The advantage in a nuclear-powered submarine of the same kind is, since it is nuclear-powered and not a diesel electric generator of the kind I just described, it means that the submarine theoretically has limitless propulsion power when it has dived. It doesn't need to come to the surface for literally anything. And its endurance underwater is only limited by, human strength, food, and other items, and, living items and things like that. Which means theoretically that submarine, if it is sufficiently stocked with everything that the crew needs, could be underwater for a year or more, which is incredible, which means it is practically undetectable and invisible from surface eyes. We'll come to detecting submarines underwater a little later. So the game-changing quality of a nuclear-powered attack submarines is a huge leap forward from the kind of submarines that we currently operate. And that's the reason why Admiral Raja Menon calls them the ultimate arbiter of sea power, because when you've got nuclear-powered attack submarines, which are capable of remaining submerged indefinitely, and therefore the enemy has no idea where your submarines are. And these are submarines which are armed with torpedoes, which can kill other submarines or ships. They're armed with anti-ship cruise missiles. They're armed with land attack missiles. So these are weapons platforms that can basically cause a lot of damage. They can really spoil someone's day. They can sink ships. They can attack other submarines. They can attack land targets. They are able to communicate with aircraft in the air, friendly aircraft in the air, to download targets. And they're basically bad news for anyone in the vicinity, that is within the kind of range of that submarine. First of all, they are extremely difficult to detect. Since they're nuclear powered, it means there are very few moving parts on board, fewer moving parts on board the submarine, which means there are less noises. And as you know, underwater, every little sound becomes amplified 100 times. And sound is everything underwater. It's not sight, it's sound. There are no windows in a submarine. Everything, all sensors are sound related, which is what sonar technology is. And therefore, these submarines are desperately needed for any country that has a large ocean domain to protect. Now, obviously, these submarines are not going to constantly be used to fire torpedoes all the time or fire missiles all the time. In fact, as we always say in our defense, the whole idea is to never get to that point where you have to fire those things. But the strength of these submarines is the notion that is in your enemy's mind that, damn, India has 12 nuclear-powered attack submarines that are all circling around somewhere in this area. I have no idea where they are, but it's probably a good idea for me not to venture too close. And that concept is called sea denial. It's a very important. Mission profile for any navy, which is to conduct something called sea denial, which basically means through your assets that are deployed, either ships or submarines, or through the suggested presence of some kind of capability like an attack submarine, you're basically signaling to the adversary, in this case China or whoever, don't enter these waters, because then there's no guarantee that things can't escalate from there, because you're not allowed in these waters. I've told you not to enter. You know what could be lurking beneath here. I'm not telling you. Who knows? Maybe we have some submarines there. And and if shit hits the fan after that, then it's your fault. So that's sea denial, right? So that's where these submarines actually come in. You can't do effective sea denial operations with a fleet of submarines that constantly need to surface. Because if they constantly surface, then China's got satellites, China's got aircraft, China's got intelligence networks that can pick up submarines that have surfaced. And as any submariner will tell you, it may not seem like it, but on a sea surface, Dev, a tiny periscope sticks out like the loudest target. It may seem like, if you point a sensor at the sea, how is it going to pick up one little periscope sticking up? A periscope paints a very big picture in an anti-submarine warfare profile or sensor. So surfacing is like an unthinkable thing for submarines. And that's where these come in.
Yeah. In fact, what you just said right now, something of that kind was written in the piece by Sandeep Punnithan. I'm paraphrasing here because he was quoting another Navy officer, but where the officer basically said that if a nuclear submarine is not in its harbor, that should ring alarm bells for the enemy, because that means it's maybe right next to you. You never know. Right. So let's get into this project itself. It's like, a very slow moving project for something that's quite fast moving. I don't know what number it is. And once again, when you come to, talk about project numbers and names with, Indian defense project, it just gets a bit of a hodgepodge. You have project 75, then you have something known as 75I or 1. I don't know what it stands for. Then you have something 75 Alpha. Then you had 76, which is what in 2021 Sandeep Punnithan said was the SSN project, the nuclear attack submarine project. Yet when I read reports this week, somehow that project has become 77. So I don't know what's happening there. But anyway, we won't go there. What I want to understand from you is exactly what this project is all about and what are we poised to get 10 years, 15 years from now. Because you might laugh at this. People who follow the world of defense might laugh at what I'm about to say. But I think that's the best way to kind of get that information out of you is, when I see it, what you need for a nuclear attack submarine, you need the ability to miniaturize a nuclear reactor. You've done that with your ballistic missile ballistic missile submarine, the INS Aryan series. You have 2 of them. The second one was just commissioned, and the third is under trial is what we hear. And you need the ability to build a damn submarine, as in the basic hull that can stay underwater without it cracking and stuff like that. Now, you've been building diesel electric submarines, so obviously you know how to design and build a submarine hull. With the INS Arihant series, even though obviously you had a lot of Russian help with that. So to me, it's like, so you've got the reactor, you've got the hull, दोनों को मिलाना है, बन गया आपके nuclear attack submarine. Am I just like, really oversimplifying it? And that's, I think, what will help you tell us exactly what do we get 15 years down the line with these submarines.
I'm a big fan of simplification because, as complicated as these issues are, the building blocks of any issue are ultimately quite simple. So you're not wrong at all in what you've just said. I would be careful about saying India has mastered creating a miniature, pressure water reactor, but it clearly has a rhythm in doing so now. Look, INS Arihant, which was India's first, effort at building a nuclear-powered submarine, which was, as you rightly said, is a nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, is a very different kind of platform. It's while ballistic missile submarines are basically the bombers of the fleet. The submarines we're talking about right now, the SSNs or nuclear-powered attack submarines, are the fighter aircraft. They're the ones used in daily, military duties. Unlike your ballistic missile submarines, which are your apocalyptic last resort submarines in the event of the outbreak of nuclear war. They're there for deterrence against nuclear attack. Now, India, being India, is basically doing this the other way around. The countries that have built nuclear submarines have usually built the slightly more simple nuclear-powered attack submarines first, and then gone on to expanding that technology to build nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, because ballistic missile submarines are have more moving parts in terms of having all these missile silos, different kinds of combat management systems. The fact that they need to house nuclear-tipped missiles, there are all those various other complications, and we have an episode on the Arihant class submarine which our viewers can listen to. But speaking specifically about this, you are absolutely right. There's nothing wrong in what you've said, which is that India has the technology to build that reactor, which is the heart of it. The reactor is it's absolutely the heart of this entire enterprise. It's what makes it a nuclear-powered attack submarine. It is the reason why these submarines don't have to surface in order to replenish oxygen, etc., etc. This is the centerpiece of the entire enterprise. And India has, if not mastered, now has the technology to build miniature nuclear-powered reactors for submarines. It has the know-how to build hulls. It is one of the most successful public-private enterprises which few people know about, written about extensively now. But Larsen and Toubro, which is one of India's large private sector companies, has collaborated with Indian state-owned agencies like the DRDO and other agencies, material making agencies, to create these hulls, create these technologies to build reasonably modern submarine hulls in Hazira in Gujarat, and then bring them to Visakhapatnam, where these submarines are integrated and manufactured at a place called the Shipbuilding Center, which is a strategic facility. Now, the technologies that went into the Arihant class submarine were test bed technologies. India needed to test those technologies. So the INS Arihant, while definitely an active submarine, it's not like it's a showpiece. It's not. It's a submarine that's actually out there with nuclear-tipped missiles inside it, capable of waging nuclear war. But the Arihant was India's test bed to give many of these first-time technologies a spin, see how they work, see how crews operate in these submarines, send them out to sea, as a kind of test bed platform. The Arighat, which was commissioned into service a few weeks ago, which we did an episode on as well, is India's first real kind of, if I could use the phrase, production series nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine. That's why India has confidently rolled it out. Now we know how to build it. We've done it confidently. There's no R&D going on. We've manufactured. It's like a production line submarine, and there will be further submarines of its class that will come out. Now, people may be tempted to think that, okay, so you've done the difficult job of building nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. Ab to SSN to दाएं हाथ का खेल hai. It's like, chill, you've already done the maths exam khatam ho gaya, now you've got your geography test. But it's not really like that. Because a nuclear-powered submarine of any kind is a complicated exercise. There are different technologies that will go into an SSN, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, by virtue of the fact that it needs to be much more agile, it needs to be faster. Unlike a ballistic missile submarine, which, like I said, is a bomber, it's a lumbering, slow-moving beast where there is no requirement for agility and maneuverability and things like that. A nuclear-powered attack submarine needs to be fast. It needs to be maneuverable and agile, and still maintain, overall stealth. There need to be, a greater emphasis on its acoustics, a greater masking of some of its technologies in order to be able to move in hostile waters. Which, unlike a ballistic missile submarine, doesn't need to go into hostile waters to launch a missile, because theoretically, from any part of the world, if it's got long enough range missiles, it can launch them at the enemy. But these submarines do need to go into quote-unquote harm's way. So there will be certain kinds of materials which will be different, certain kinds of sensors which will be different, sound profiles, survivability technologies on board these submarines, which will be quite different from the ballistic missile submarines. So yes, so while we do have the reactor, while we do have the hull, while we do have hundreds of thousands of other little systems that will be common between all these submarines, because they won't be entirely different, there are unique systems like the ones I've named, which will mean that this is going to be a challenge as well. It's not like, theek hai, wo ho gaya, ab ye karenge. It's not going to be that simple.
Yeah. No wonder, I mean, this project is so costly. I mean, when it was first mooted, I mean, it was under discussion in 2021 by the CCS for clearance. I think the cost was rupees 96,000 crore for 6.
Yeah.
What has been cleared a couple of days ago is 2 for the price of rupees 45,000 crore. But I'm guessing that also involves the developmental cost. So once you've got these 2 out there, then perhaps, getting more will be a bit easier. To help our listeners and viewers better understand what that extra teeth that the Navy gets with these submarines, let's go to one of our. We haven't done it very often actually, but when we do it, we have a lot of fun. The hypotheticals that we do of we kind of sit here cozy in our office and we war game pretending to be like generals and admirals. But sort of a war game scenario with, let's say, China. Let's say you have these submarines in your fleet. It'll take around 10-15 years, like I said. Based on what we know, the kind of technologies that they'll have, based on the sort of missile profile that they have, I think the plan is to have this version of BrahMos 2 with these submarines when they are launched. We don't know that it'll happen simultaneously or not. But anyway, you get my point.
Yeah.
So once you have these, let's say you have 2, 3, 4 of them in your fleet, what does that give to the Navy that it does not currently have, apart from what you said, obviously, and in sort of, I won't say outright war, but in sort of something even as simple as a standoff along the Ladakh border, or sort of a maybe higher intensity conflict that is not exactly a war, but there is some sort of physical maneuvering happening here and there. What sort of ability does it give to the Navy that it currently does not have?
Extremely long legs, for one thing. Since you want to war game it, with your current submarine fleet, there is no prospect of sending submarines into the South China Sea. No. With nuclear-powered attack submarines, which don't have the constraints of having to refuel and surface occasionally and constantly make themselves vulnerable on that long journey through the Malacca Strait and into the South China Sea, theoretically, a nuclear-powered attack submarine from India could dive somewhere off the coast of Visakhapatnam and theoretically remain submerged for the entire duration of its journey till the South China Sea, and nobody would be any the wiser about it. Apart from the submarine commander and one sensor station somewhere in Tamil Nadu, there's a place called INS Kattabomman, which is a listening station for communications with India's submarines. Nobody would theoretically know where that submarine is. unless they were really, really good and really, really tracking and really, really looking for it, which is a difficult thing to do because that requires an enormous amount of resources deployed all the time and a generous measure of luck, because you're practically looking at an entire ocean and wondering where the hell is that one little submarine. So it dives somewhere in Visakhapatnam. It doesn't surface in the South China Sea. It remains submerged there as well. But the thing about submarine warfare is that such a large part of it is about suggestion. Such a large part of it is about the menace of its presence. Such a large part of it is the threat that something is there, but we don't know what it is, and we'd rather not risk doing what we would have done if we were sure there was no submarine. That's submarine warfare is ultimately about that. There are movies like Hunt for the Red October and others, which show these cat and mouse chases between submarines, which are very fancy. But apart from the submarine wars and the ship versus submarine wars in World War II, I don't think that kind of thing has ever really happened, where you've seen genuine kind of underwater dogfights between submarines. Doesn't work that way. These are kind of range animals. The entire scope of their threat is the fact that they can detect you, they can threaten you from large distances. So that's what it's really going to be. Now, remember that China is a country that has a navy that's growing faster than any navy in the world. There is no comparison between India and China when it comes to submarine assets. They've got a vast, huge fleet of conventional submarines, and they've got a fairly mature nuclear submarine program already. India's taking its first steps into this world. China has nuclear-powered ballistic missile and nuclear-powered attack submarines, including new generation submarines. I've forgotten the name. They've got confusing names, but those are also coming online. So, there have been reports about how nuclear-powered attack submarines from the Chinese Navy have ventured into the Indian Ocean. They've been into the Arabian Sea as well. There have been reports about how the Indian Navy has actually been able to track some of them sometimes, but we don't have our own. And if we need that ultimate arbiter of sea power, as Admiral Raja Menon said, we do need our own submarines, because we can't play those mind games back with helicopters and aircraft. Those mind games can only be played back meaningfully if we also have a hidden strength underwater. And we have to remember also that China is keenly aware of the absence of this kind of submarine in the Indian fleet right now. And that's one of the reasons why China believes it can sort of establish a submarine footprint in the Indian Ocean before India catches up. The sad truth is India is catching up. We don't have these submarines, and it is actually, at some point, somebody should investigate why it has taken, the earlier government and this government so long to clear, what should have been, an obvious program to sort of devote resources into. There may be many reasons, aircraft. There's that whole argument about aircraft carriers versus submarines. We don't have limitless resources. But China has been working meticulously to create submarine maps in the Indian Ocean. They've got hydrographic, you read reports, Dave, and you've seen so many of these reports of Chinese research vessels in the Indian Ocean, near Sri Lanka, near Maldives, and, near the Andamans, etc. And these may seem like innocent, innocuous vessels. China says they are conducting hydrography, but these ships are conducting very detailed mapping studies of the seabed of the Indian Ocean, creating large data banks of what the Indian Ocean seabed looks like, in order to create a huge data bank of maps for their submarines. This is hugely valuable data, depth data, where, as you know, the seabed is not one flat surface. It's mountains and canyons and varying depths and shifting altitudes and things like that. And if China has a very firm grip on what the seabed in the Indian Ocean looks like, that much faster it can deploy submarines, that much more efficiently it can send submarines into the Indian Ocean, which is something we can't do right now as effectively as them because we don't have nuclear-powered attack submarines. So until we get those, they still have that first mover advantage in the Indian Ocean, which is a in some ways almost an unthinkable thing, but it is going to happen. I'm not saying that India and the Indian Navy are sitting ducks and that Chinese submarines can just float in whenever they want and do whatever they want and leave. It's not like that at all. It is not only through submarines that India can deter Chinese submarines, because we've got aircraft, we've got helicopters, we've got our own underwater sensors, we've got anti-submarine warfare ships, and our own conventional submarines that can do the job. But to come back to that point, to really sort of bang for bang as far as undersea warfare is concerned, nothing quite unites in terms of the power that India needs like a nuclear-powered attack submarine.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have put it better, and I completely agree with you when you say that governments should at some point kind of look back and figure out why sort of this project was not approved in the first place, much earlier.
Yeah.
And for example, Sandeep's piece, that's from 2021, and that piece is all about that the CCS is about to clear this project.
Yeah.
About to cut 3.5 साल हो गया भाई. How is about to 3.5 years, including one entire election
and even
cycle?
then it was delayed.
Yeah. So you can imagine. Right. We'll talk a bit now about how this project might pan out over the next few years, but after a quick break.
I think it's a compliment that they think it's great.
It's a good sign, when you are copy.
It's a good sign.
You guys have dressed royalties as well.
There was a kind of a lightning bolt in Paris each time there was a new designer, because it was such a small world in couture, And when we started, it was the end of the Texan oil billionaires. Well, you used to call them millionaires at that time. The billionaires is only now.
Okay.
So the millionaires would be coming to Paris, and you say, oh, someone flew in a Concorde. So that was like the big deal. And then suddenly the whole scene changed, and it was the Arabs coming to Paris. And Arabs have very big families.
Yeah.
The Arab princesses reflected more to a kind of something oriental in designs, and we were doing this thing which was in between. We'd say it was in between a jacket and a sari.
So you struck the right chord.
So we struck the right chord for these ladies, and we got a lot of very faithful clients.
Oh yeah.
There was one clan of ladies from the northern province of Saudi Arabia. I think it was like 25 ladies with one princess on the top, and she just adored me because I would speak very frankly to her. She would say like, "Oh, Mr. Hammond, I want dress, and you bring me dress with gold here and yellow here and orange there and blue here and everything. And what do you think?" I said, "I think you were going to look like a Christmas tree, princess."
Welcome back. Shiv and I are talking about nuclear attack submarines, two of which have been given the go-ahead by the government. The construction, building, etc. will start soon. When I was making the notes for this episode, it kind of struck me that at no point did I make a note to ask you about or to discuss how confident are you about this project succeeding, about us getting nuclear attack submarines, because I just realized that when it comes to the Navy, like it's almost sort of guaranteed that once it's cleared, once that money is flowing, it will be done. Unlike many of our systems with the Air Force or with the Army. So we've discussed Tejas, for example. Tejas is in the service, fantastic aircraft, but of course the initial few years were a lot of back and forth between the Air Force and the HAL. Air Force was not happy. They got a test sort of a try karke le lo, and then we'll make some modifications. Then you had the Arjun main battle tank, which we've discussed very recently, which you've said like it is a failure. You have to accept that. Then you have the Insas rifle, even though it's been in service for very, very long, but overall Army not very happy with its quality. Then you had the Kaveri engine, great, sort of initiative, but did not really end up going anywhere. Navy doesn't have to worry about that, it seems, and Navy doesn't even have to worry about, or rather doesn't feel the need to go shop around. It's sort of a very sort of well-oiled sort of machinery ki as long as paisa mil gaya, they just know what needs to be done, and that will be done. So how is it that we have managed to have this system that everything is sort of like custom built for Navy, and it is, I'm guessing to an extent, exactly what they need and perfectly and perfect for them, which is why do you like me share this sort of confidence that this project, like all other naval projects, is going to end up seeing the light of day and it's going to be a successful one?
So there are very good reasons for it, and that's a very good question. Now, for one thing, unlike the Air Force and the Army, the Navy's hardware, which is ships, submarines, and big things like that, take many years to make and deliver. So the lead time from placing an order or choosing it and till delivery is never less than 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe even more in some cases. Which means that the Navy doesn't have the luxury of making too many changes and things like that. The Navy has definitely done its share of shopping around, believe me. They've got a lot of things where they've shopped around. But when it comes to building things here in India, unlike the Army and the Air Force, I won't say unlike the Army and Air Force, but compared to the Army and Air Force, the Navy's culture and way of doing things is to embed itself substantially in terms of human power in every single project. So whether it is a project being developed at Cochin shipyard or by DRDO somewhere or some shipbuilding organization somewhere, or a submarine building at Mazagon in Mumbai, the team that is doing the development work will be almost entirely comprised of Navy officials, serving Navy. Wow. The Navy has its own design bureau, of course. These teams work in tandem with designers from shipbuilding organizations and other develop R&D organizations. So they are very, very collaborative from the ground up, from the from the drawing board, metaphorically and literally. The Navy is involved. It's not like comparatively, it's not like an Army or an Air Force guy checking out a few things, placing an order, and then not really being part of it until delivery. That culture has changed now. Now the Air Force and the Army very professionally embed themselves. They've got teams that are part of the R&D process in all indigenous projects. Wasn't the case before, no matter what anyone says. I'm willing to argue till the end about something like this, but the Navy has done this right from the beginning. But it's not so much a virtue, but it's a virtue that has been burnished from necessity. The Navy knows that unless they don't micromanage, unless they are not directly involved from the get-go, 7 years from now, what if they get something that they didn't want? What if they get something that they didn't order, or something that doesn't fit their requirements, or something that's suboptimal? At least if they've got people from the drawing board who've been monitoring at every step, contributing, being part of the R&D, being part of the manufacturing, then they've got ownership. They've got they can claim that this is theirs, and that's the reason why the Navy does things in that very, very professional manner. So believe me, even with this nuclear powered attack submarine program, the Navy will be right there. More often than not, actually mostly, including with the Arihant project, the project director was always a naval admiral, a rear admiral or a vice admiral rank officer, serving officer. And these are shipbuilding projects. So you're wondering how a serving officer is a shipbuilding project, because the Navy also views these machines, these programs as strategic. A nuclear-powered submarine of any kind is a strategic asset. It costs absolute eye-watering sum of money, like you just said, 16,000 crore per boat, which, believe me, is actually not very much compared to other nuclear submarines. Wow. But it's the Navy signaling that this is how we'll do things, because we don't have the luxury of saying, oh, this is not what we ordered 7 years from now.
Right. We'll just like one last point on the topic of nuclear attack submarines. INS Chakra. We've leased 2 from the Russians, both I think around 10-year leases, and I think both over. And there is talk of INS Chakra 3. I think submarine is being kind of refurbished in some naval dockyard in Russia, and that was supposed to be here by now. I think I last saw a report in 2023, a year ago, that there has been some delay. Yeah. Because I'm guessing of the Russia-Ukraine war. Where does that stand with respect to us? Obviously, the ones that we are building will take around 10-15 years. So do you think that Chakra 3 is still on, and we're going to get it again for, like you said, for training the crews, so that we have sort of a well ready to take on these submarines once they arrive?
So the Chakra 3 is very much still on. It's basically a refurbished refurbishment program of an existing Akula 2 submarine called the K-152 Nerpa. It's a submarine that was in service with the Russians, and that will be now basically refurbished for India. It's very much online. There appears to be some kind of disagreement over when it's going to be delivered, but I'm assuming it's going to be sometime this decade, which will be, as you know, in time and running parallelly with India's own nuclear-powered attack submarine development program, because it'll mean that that platform will be available for, I assume, for testing systems and continuing the training of crew for a period of time in such a way that by the time India's own homegrown nuclear-powered sharks, come online, we'll have a fully trained crew, maintainers, technicians, mechanics, welders, that kind of thing by the end of it. Yes, you're right. India's experience with these submarines so far have all been leased submarines of two kinds. One has been a Charlie class submarine, which was leased for only a few years, not even 10. It was leased, if my memory serves me right, for maybe 4 or 5 years between the late 80s and early 90s, 87 to 91, if I'm not mistaken. That was the Chakra 1. And the Chakra 2 was commissioned in 2011. That served for a full 10 years till 2021. Then it went back to Russia. There were various problems with it. There were a couple of accidents as well. The Chakra 3 is going to be the same kind of submarine as the Chakra 2, which is Akula 2. I mean, they're amazing submarines. Russia is a past master at building nuclear-powered submarines of all kinds, so they know a thing or two about what they're doing. And even with this SSN program, with the Shark program, I'm assuming that there will be a degree of Russian involvement, even though India has matured in terms of how it's going to carry things forward. And I bet India will want to keep as many things, homegrown and secret as Russia usually does itself. But there will be Russian components in the R&D process.
Yeah. I think it was you or maybe Abhishek Palla in season 1 who spoke about how when the reactor for INS Haryant was being developed, the town where it was happening had so many Russians coming in that it almost became a Russian town because of the number of Russian scientists who used to keep coming.
Visakhapatnam is still like that. It's still like that. In Visakhapatnam airport at one point of time, anytime you landed in Visakhapatnam, you would always see Russians either arriving or leaving from there. So yeah, absolutely.
We'll turn our focus a bit as we close this episode to anti-submarine warfare. Now, in the last 40 minutes, Shiv, what you've described, it just seems to me then there's no point investing in this technology. Like, it just moved, right? This is also a nice time to talk about it because we are getting those drones from the US. 16 of those will be for the Indian Navy, the Sea Guardians, and the Air Force and the Navy, Army are getting the Sky Guardians. You had shared a pretty cool video of the Sea Guardian, how it can take out a submarine. I think we've also once talked about, I think it was in the context of a helicopter deal that we had, I think, again signed with the US, if I'm not wrong. I forgot the name, which one it was, where you had described how exactly anti-submarine warfare happens from something that is up in the air and not on the ocean. So keeping these equipments in mind and the fact that you've said that, identifying and tracking, because attacking it obviously might be easy, but first you have to find that damn thing in the vast ocean that you have on Earth. So then where do you see the future of anti-submarine warfare if you will slowly have nations like for the US Navy having only nuclear attack submarines?
Well, for every advancement in a kind of offensive technology like a submarine, there will always be a parallel technology that will try to defeat it. And more often than not, the same companies that make those weapons will make those anti-weapons as well. That's the nature of war. That's the nature of the arms bazaar. It's good to be cynical about these things, but it's a brutal, bloodless business. We are a world that is at war, and that's the way things are. But, for example, there are drones and there's anti-drone technology. There are ships and there are anti-ship missiles. There are fighter aircraft and there are surface-to-air missiles. There are radars and there are anti-radar weapons. This is the way the world works. So similarly with submarines, there's anti-submarine warfare technology, and alongside the US and Russia, which are the kind of vanguards as far as submarine technology is concerned, they're also the pioneers and the vanguards in terms of anti-submarine warfare technology is concerned. It's a good question, what is the point of pushing forward with great submarine tech if anti-submarine tech is also progressing in such a rapid way? True, but the thing is, how you can't not invest in submarine technology. The benefits of submarine technology are such that it's not a binary question about, but because there are all these anti-submarine warfare techs, we shouldn't be investing in submarines. For instance, India has a huge number of anti-submarine warfare assets. We've got a dedicated fleet of ships that conduct anti-submarine operations. We've got aircraft, we've got helicopters. You just mentioned the drones. They're capable of plugging into the anti-submarine warfare sort of targeting ecosystem. And this is what our adversaries also have. So you theoretically have a kind of battlefield where you've got your submarines versus enemy submarines. You've got your anti-submarine warfare capabilities versus the enemy's anti-submarine warfare capabilities. And all of this kind of creates an equilibrium. And that's where deterrence actually happens. It's ultimately a cat and mouse game. They will find your gaps, you will find their gaps. They'll be able to send submarines where your anti-submarine warfare strength is the weakest. You'll be able to sneak up on them when they're sleeping. That's the nature of war, and it's especially the nature of submarine operations, where the nature of the game is stealth, the element of surprise, not knowing where you got hit from. Those are all the things associated with submarine warfare. But every kind of technology, warfare technology, is ultimately a kind of race with itself. And it may seem ironic to most people when they see it, saying, "Arey, you're buying drones, but you're also buying anti-drone technology. How does that really work?" But that is how it works, because you're surrounded by countries that are doing exactly the same thing, and you need to be prepared on both fronts. The drones that you just mentioned, the MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones that the Indian Navy is getting, is capable of deploying sonobuoys into the sea. And these drones are incredibly capable. We've done more than a couple of episodes about them. And they are drones that will plug into an existing Indian Navy anti-submarine warfare targeting ecosystem that includes MH-60 Romeo helicopters, also American, the P-8I Poseidon submarine hunting aircraft, also American. We've got other kinds of anti-submarine warfare assets like our ships, etc., which will all be part of the sensor-to-shooter loop. So theoretically, you may have these drones flying in the air, paint a picture of a scenario where India destroys a Chinese submarine. It's been able to track it. It's not obeying commands. The Chinese are, and we reach a point where the commander has been ordered to destroy that Chinese submarine. You could theoretically have a situation where the drones that you're flying have dropped sonobuoys to be able to triangulate and identify exactly where that submarine is. And then either an MH-60 Romeo helicopter or a Poseidon or even a ship or even a submarine would fire a torpedo that goes and destroys that submarine. So this gives the Indian anti-submarine force, submarine and anti-submarine force, because they run parallel, a huge amount of flexibility. And whenever there is flexibility, it means that there is that much more to think about for your adversary. Because now they've got to think about, okay, they've got helicopters, they've got planes, they've got ships, they've got undersea sensors, they've got their own submarines, they've got these drones that are going to give us sleepless nights now, which means that my effort to enter the Indian Ocean with my submarines becomes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times more difficult. And ultimately deterrence and combat is about making life a little bit more difficult for your enemy or your adversary. We live in a world where it's going to be unlikely that India goes to a big war with any country. Ultimately, it's going to be these little skirmishes, little cat and mouse situations, and this game of seduction and dissuasion, where submarines will play a very, very big part.
Right. Right. Final thoughts on this episode, and we go back to that controversial question for the Indian Navy of submarines versus aircraft carriers. Is anybody ever going to bell the cat and just give an answer for that debate, or are we just gonna keep pushing this question down the road, hoping miraculously one day you have enough money to kind of fund both? Because the way I see it is, instead of 6, you've given 2, so you're still kind of keeping the door open for the second aircraft carrier, the third that the Indian Navy wants, second Indian aircraft carrier, Indian made aircraft carrier, the one we have in service, INS Vikrant. But the longer you keep pushing that question down the road, the higher the risk you run of first losing the talent that help you build INS Vikrant, so that they can easily build another one. And second, you have INS Aditya, your older aircraft carrier, the one that you bought from Russia, reaching closer to its sort of end of life, and then you just have end up with one aircraft carrier. So what's the current thought on this? How seriously is this being question being? Because I think when you had the late General Bipin Rawat, who was the Chief of Defence Staff, this question was really being kind of addressed. It's a kind of feeling that we got that he really wanted to kind of end this debate for once and for all, at least for the near future, and ensure that the Navy was more or less on board with what was being decided. But then again, you have this now question open. The Navy it has made it very clear that the Navy wants a third aircraft carrier and the second Indian one. You've now given the go-ahead for some nuclear attack submarines. So where does that debate stand? Is the question ever going to be addressed?
I think it stands on a razor's edge, frankly, Dev, right now, because while the option of building another aircraft carrier is very much there, you're right that it's not going to be an indefinite time window to do that, because ultimately it will have to be built using the same tools that were used to build the INS Vikrant, and that's not going to last forever. I don't know what that time window is, but it can't be very long, so a decision will have to be made. On the other hand, and I keep repeating this, India does not have an unlimited budget, and especially for the Indian Navy, and this has been a spectacular month and year for the Indian Navy. A number of crucial deals that have been meandering for years together have been cleared. The drone deal's been cleared. The nuclear-powered Shark deal has been cleared. But we have to remember also that clearance for these 2 submarines is very insufficient.
Yes.
The overall program is going to be for 6 submarines. I'm assuming that 2 have been cleared for budgetary reasons. Get these 2 out the window, and then those orders will flow for 4 or 8 more or whatever it is. But you already have a huge budgetary commitment, for maritime warfare in the form of these 2 programs already. So I'm wondering whether the system is going to be in a position to even take a decision on a third aircraft carrier by the time a decision needs to be taken in order to be able to build it in Cochin again. Frankly, the system has been preoccupied with various other issues for a while now. But I think the very fact that the nuclear submarine program has been cleared, I think signals that maybe the section within the Indian Navy that says that priority, we've got 2 aircraft carriers. They're like, hello, we've got 2 aircraft carriers. A third aircraft carrier is philosophically a necessity, which is part of the of the proposition that you need to have 1 aircraft carrier on either seaboard at any given point of time, and 1 in refit or maintenance, because they take a hell of a long time to maintain. But that's a luxury. I mean, that it would be wonderful to be able to do that and have 3 aircraft carriers. But is that going to be done at the risk or by sacrificing the chance of building nuclear-powered attack submarines, which you most definitely need and don't even have 1 of? Forget about 2. You don't have even 1 of them, and you don't even have leased ones. So I think the government has taken a brave decision, albeit a very, very belated decision. Those delays have already harmed India. But I think there is a signal in this decision There is a signal that we're going to take some difficult decisions, and if it means some cruel application of priorities, so be it. It doesn't mean they're saying no aircraft carrier. They're just saying, look, with the money we have right now, here's what we're going to do. And if that means that the possibility of a third aircraft carrier simply evaporates, then that will be the name of the game, because there is already a very, very strong section that believes that for a country like India, power projection using aircraft carriers is going to be less meaningful than the sea denial that I was talking about. It's not about power projection. Aircraft carriers are by their nature about, expeditionary abilities, the ability to send a reasonably well-armed air force by sea, to conduct operations elsewhere. But would we not rather have highly capable, hardly detectable, virtually limitless endurance submarines that are capable of doing many more things at a far smaller cost? So that's what I think this is. But we'll have to wait and see. This is India ultimately. Who knows? We may get both.
Yeah, in fact, I'm a sort of you can say a convert because I am a big fan of aircraft carriers. They are very cool, I think. They are majestic.
What's
very
not to
large.
love?
Exactly. But over the course of the season 2 of In Our Defense, with the kind of research I've had to do for our episodes and talking to you, I've kind of come around to realizing the sheer need for having nuclear attack submarines. And I'm talking in a scenario like you just described, when you already have 2 in service and you have no nuclear attack submarines. Perhaps it is a wiser move to prioritize that in this current moment and then figure out if and when can you get that third aircraft carrier. I keep saying second because I mean the second Indian-made aircraft carrier. I think we'll end it on that note then. Fun chat, fun episode, and I think it's a project that I think Shiv was like waiting for a longest time, because I could see it in your eyes when you mentioned this project back in the INS Ariant episode of how much I think this is something that you've been waiting for a while. So thanks, Shiv. Great chat, and thanks to our producer Anna Priyadarshini and to all our listeners and viewers. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not toss any boundaries with the passport. Bye-bye.